Ian Connelly, my brother, what up? Back at it.
Hey, how's it going, buddy?
It's going, man. It's going perpetually weirder and stranger all the time.
I hear that. You can't, there's always something different, weird every day you're coming across.
Always, man. If it's not personal weirdness, it's a world weirdness. It goes up in levels. It's like
Yeah, it
regional
does.
weirdness, personal weirdness, world weirdness.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, man, you said on the messages we were talking about before we got on the show that you had some Slenderman stuff, or maybe not some Slenderman stuff, but some crawler, white,
Yeah,
creepy pasta stuff.
yeah, it was basically my theory on like the whole creepy pastas because I was listening to your last episode,
Hell yeah, man.
and it made me really think because I feel like there's some parallels with um, with the theory of if a big enough a collective of people
Mm-hmm.
believe in something, then it starts to become true. It's
Yes.
almost kind of like the Mandela effect, but not but not like not real, if that makes sense. Um,
Not real.
right.
No,
Well,
I feel you. I get you.
but what I'm so my idea is the fact that um, it parallels with like the whole poltergeist,
Mm-hmm,
like
mm-hmm.
how poltergeists come around, because I've always was under the impression or the understanding of poltergeists are created by negative energy
Yeah.
in a house or a place, and when there's a buildup of enough of this negative energy, then it can become physical.
Right.
And it may not necessarily be because somebody died in the house, but it's just like a whole bunch of negativity. It's not necessarily a specific spirit, and that just that parallels with the whole Slenderman and the collective of people believing in something, and it can manifest and into something real. And like you put that energy, it's all about putting that energy
Mm-hmm.
out there, because that's something that just never goes away, is energy.
Absolutely.
Everything is energy,
Yep.
and when when you have enough people believing in something, I feel like it can really make you know something come true, or something become something, like and it doesn't even just end with something manifesting like a slender man or a
Right.
crawler or something like that. I feel like that could also be a beacon to religious,
Yes.
like for miracles, you
Yes.
know and also could be a beacon for aliens,
Yes.
you know
Yeah.
so like that, it's just like it's like a blinking light of energy, this thought, and it's just projecting out into everything, the universe and beyond. And you just build on that, and something's going to come of it. So
Absolutely. Well, in
that was just
magic,
kind of my theory.
dude, I dig it a lot, and I've actually been talking in different ways about very similar theories to different people recently. So in magic, and we've talked about this. I feel like you and I have. That whole process is somewhat what's called an egregore, but I feel like with an egregore, whereas that process that you're talking about is more accidental, I guess. Would you call it accidental?
Yeah, it's definitely, I wouldn't necessarily call it intentional,
Right.
but at the same time, I don't know. I feel like there.
That's the
Yeah.
question. Do
Let's go
you
with accidental. Yeah,
let's go with
it's a
that.
really gray. Yeah,
Yeah.
for me, it's a little fuzzy, but I guess that's the best way to put it.
Well, that makes me think of something else. But in magic practices, there's this ritual of like focusing on, and in this instance, like with egregores and stuff, it's literally focusing on an instance of a creature or an entity that you want to manifest into reality. And a
Hmm.
lot of that, I think there's that old story about that. I think it's a Tibetan monk who like channeled one of these things into reality and like kind of used it as like a servant or something. And eventually, like it develops its own personality because the longer it stays in the physical corporeal realm, the more it becomes a physical corporeal being, and it has its own will and its own intentions and whatever. It's kind of like having a child, right? Like the first years that you have a kid, that kid is all about you, wants to be up your butt all the time, whatever. But slowly as it develops, it becomes its own thing. It has its own intentions. It has its own ideas. It's very much like that, except with these egregores, from my understanding, of course, old disclaimer, don't know shit about shit, not a magician, whatever. But like from my understanding with these guys, like it happens quick. Like you can channel an egregore into existence if you know what you're doing. And within a month, it can be, completely independent of you, which is an interesting idea too, right? Because that's ideas. Like you can talk about an idea and you can send it out into the ether. And if it's like a viral idea, it'll pick up and spread without you even, doing anything. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that's kind of that whole thing, except we're talking, I mean, it's very literally that whole thing, except I think with magic and with magicians and egregores, it's very intentional. They seek to create the egregore.
Right. That makes a lot of sense.
So do you think with these entities, like let's take Slenderman for example. So Slenderman is a really good example of this, right? Because Slenderman supposedly starts out as this internet entity that was created online, creepypasta story, whatever. But then there's people seeing Slenderman, and there's people killing in the name of Slenderman. And there's, I mean, like, man, that's fucking religion, right? Like if you're like people kill in the name of religion, people are killing in the name of Slenderman. You know what I mean?
Right.
So do you think with those type of entities, Slenderman specifically, do you think it was an accident that he was channeled into reality? Or do you think somebody maliciously, I don't even know if it's malicious, but somebody purposefully creates this entity and then sends it out, and they're just waiting for all this energy to bubble up and to blow up and to make this thing manifest? Do you think it's a purposeful thing in that instance?
Yeah, I think I'm definitely with the thought process of the latter. With somebody just putting that little seed out there in hopes to see it grow into this big thing. And but my theories on this is like it's very different, because like I'm a big I'm not too keen on people making profit off of the paranormal, because it's one thing to make a horror film like with Freddy Krueger and stuff, but like once you get into like the found footage stuff, which we've discussed, that I feel like kind of takes away from the legitimacy of the real science of people trying to prove this, or just at least get to the truth of it.
Right.
And then when you have creepypastas and people put this out there in hopes to see, it's a blurring those lines of, where's entertainment, and then where are you going to try to manipulate stuff to either, have some malicious gain or a profitable gain, and it's like, it's really, it's very fine line for me in a very gray area. And I'm very opinionated on that. You know what I mean?
No, dude, I dig that a lot, and I completely agree. And you've got a really good point there, because there's a lot of these entities, right? Like it's not just Slenderman. It's like Momo. You remember the whole Momo thing from a few years ago? Momo, Smile Dog, who somebody mentioned in our podcast. And dude, me and Cody were like, the fuck is Smile Dog when we were producing. So we looked this thing up, right? And like, of course, there's like meme wikis that, give you the full. So we looked Smile Dog up, and it's this demonic dog, literally a demon dog who, has been possessed by blah, 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 blah. And at a certain level, right? Like, I get it. Like, we were kids too. You know what I mean? We had like Children of the Corn and all that shit. And like, this is what kids do. You know what I mean? Like, we talk about really scary shit that fucks up our minds for a little bit. But also, I mean, literally, like, shit, you're familiar with the world of demonology somewhat. If you give it's my belief, right? That if you give a demon, whatever a demon is, I'm not saying that, demons are the angels of Lucifer or whatever, but whatever a demon is, if you give a demon a vessel to
Right.
enter into the corporeal realm, it's going to take it. I mean,
Exactly.
it's going to do it. And man, I would go a step further, and maybe this is getting into spirituality and like a little bit into religion, but I would go a step further and say that there are a lot of sicknesses and a lot of like just like world, like what may seem to people like just normal issues and normal problems that are demons in disguise, if that makes sense. Like, you know, it's almost like it's coded into reality that this is the what word am I looking for? Like the avatar that they're able to enter into our universe from. The Momo one was a big one for me because, of course, like my kids are at the age where, like, you know, they had just started into YouTube and just started into TikTok and that shit, which I hate. And I mean, I have a YouTube channel and like I love YouTube, but you know, once your kids start into those things, it's a whole different world.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
But that Momo thing really freaked me out because I was like, dude, what if my kids stumble across this? You know what I mean?
Right. Well, Small Town Monsters did a thing on Momo, if I'm not mistaken.
Dude, I didn't know that.
I want to say I seen a
Oh,
documentary.
wait, they did, which this is interesting too, man. They did Momo, the Missouri Monster, which was the Bigfoot. And this Momo was that weird looking bird head thing from like the yeah.
I haven't dived too deep into creepypastas just because or like some of these creepypasta monsters or whatever you want to call them.
Right.
Just because of the whole like blurring those lines of entertainment and stuff. But my thing with that is like when you're bringing children into it, because like I'm a firm believer that like up to a certain age, like kids can see that they're super sensitive.
Yes.
You know, and like if my son were to come up and say, "Hey, Daddy, I keep seeing this scary man at night."
Yes.
You know what I mean? And it's like a perpetual thing, and he can give me crazy details that, that's not necessarily, imagination induced. I mean, I feel like if you should know your kid enough to be able to tell the difference. Like if they have an active imagination and they're super creative, then you want to pick that apart and really be. But like if it doesn't seem like they're that kind of a kid, then you're going to want to really believe. And I feel like that kind of energy, when you bring kids in it, like, the demonic or these, evil entities will feed on that. And that kind of leads into what you were saying with, it gives them a vessel to manifest within. And I think that, when demons want to, pose as children in certain circumstances, then, then, you're messing with some pretty nasty stuff.
Yes.
But like I'll go back to that one story I told you on my first big.
Oh yeah, the transmissions from the Abyss episode. Yeah.
Right. And I was telling you about how we drew the same picture, and it was like the family was constantly talking about seeing this little girl in the house. But then I had that vision, and the two other people in my group had the same vision of this demonic rat looking beast.
Right.
Maybe that's its way of presenting itself to the family to lure them into that false sense of security. But like when you're screwing with kids, there's that pure innocence energy there that, that I feel like can be easily manipulated or taken advantage of, and really put that like beacon out there for,
Absolutely.
Like, hey, come get me.
Yeah. Well, I think, man, if we go down that whole magical thing about like egregores and shit, like with from my understanding, like with that type of stuff, like drawing that in, or like, because I mean, all that stuff is manifestation. It's putting yourself in a mind state where the ritual seems like it's literally convincing yourself it's working, right? I mean, it's convincing yourself that what you're doing is affecting your reality. And as adults, I feel like we have a hard time doing that a lot because, like you said earlier, kids are kind of, or we hinted at this earlier, kids are kind of, processed out of that. Like we live in a very much society that's like, well, anything imaginable is not real. And, you
Mhm.
know, as we talk about on the show a lot, what the fuck does real even mean? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, like, with kids, it's not like that. With kids, I mean, their view of the world, like you were saying, is so much wider and so much deeper in a lot of ways
Mhm.
than adults because they haven't had that. I mean, fuck, to put it abrasively, they've not had that beat out of them yet. You know what I mean?
Right.
They've not had
It's very
that.
pure.
Yeah. And like, it was kind of like Jamie and I were talking about with like Native American tribes last night. You know, they talk about like having meetings with like Sasquatch and stuff like that. And like Sasquatch being just another tribe of people who they met with.
Mhm.
And we hear that now and we're like, that sounds mind blowing, right? But to
Mhm.
them, they lived so much closer to these other realms. Like it was just like,
Oh yeah.
you know, it was right beside of them. And in a lot of ways, I think that that's the same with kids, right? Because with kids, they've not had that whole thing where it's like, well, no, none of this stuff actually exists. This is reality. This is, you know, this is the only thing. This is the hard line, physical realm. None of that shit that you're thinking of exists. So that belief and that intention is way purer and it's way more, you know. So like with a child, it would be much easier if you can convince that child to pull you into the corporeal realm than it would be. And just the fact, you know, that as adults, we kind of know from pop culture or whatever what demons do, right? Like we're
Right.
familiar with the subset. But man, I mean, like if you had and this is another common thing with like alien abduction and shit or abduction experiences. If you had like a clown walk into your room as like a 4-year-old in the middle of the night, yeah, it'd be kind of freaky, I'm sure, but like, you know, it's not going to trigger that same shit like with an adult that an adult's going to be like, what the fuck is happening? With like a
Right.
kid, it's just going to be like, oh, this is cool. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it could be that clown could be some physical manifestation of who the fuck knows what. So,
Exactly.